Hello and welcome to Her Revenge Arc. I am your narrator. I invite you to find a quiet space, to let the world outside fall away, and to listen. The story I have for you tonight is not one of loud, explosive revenge. It is a tale about the quiet, meticulous architecture of justice. It is about the difference between a person who builds and a person who takes, and the inevitable moment when a foundation built on theft collapses under its own weight. This is a story for anyone who has ever poured their soul into their work, only to watch someone else claim it as their own. It is the story of a time bomb, planted not with malice, but with an unshakable belief in the truth. And it begins, as so many of these stories do, in the quiet, fluorescent hum of a corporate office. The world of Sterling Thorn Analytics was a world of glass and whispers. Our offices occupied the 47th and 48th floors of a skyscraper that pierced the city's skyline like a shard of ice. From my desk, I could see the whole sprawling metropolis, a complex network of arteries and intersections, of data points and human variables. I loved that view. It reminded me of my work. I am, by trade and by nature, a data strategist. I find patterns in the chaos. I listen to the numbers until they tell me their story. My work is quiet, meticulous, and largely invisible. For 5 years this suited me perfectly. My boss, the Thorn in Sterling Thorn, was Marcus Thorn. Marcus was not a man who listened to numbers. He listened to people, but only to gauge their usefulness to him. He was a masterpiece of corporate aesthetics. His suits were impeccably tailored. His smile was the perfectly calibrated instrument of charm, and his voice was a warm, confident baritone that could make the most banal platitudes sound like profound wisdom. He moved through the office like a shark gliding through water smoothly, elegantly, and always with an eye for his next meal. He was not a stupid man, but he was not a brilliant one either. His primary skill was appropriation. He could spot a good idea from a mile away, and he had an almost supernatural talent for absorbing it, polishing it, and presenting it as if it had sprung fully formed from his own mind. He did this not with brute force, but with a subtle, insidious grace. He would call it synergy or ideation incubation. He would praise your initial concept, then slowly, through a series of meetings and brainstorms, he would envelop it, rephrase it, and ultimately claim it. By the time he presented it, you were left feeling like you had merely contributed a small, insignificant piece to his grand vision. He made you a collaborator in your own erasure. I was his favorite resource. Eleanor Vance. The quiet, reliable analyst in the corner. I was good at my job. I was better than good. I saw connections that others missed. I could take a mountain of raw, chaotic data and distill it into a single, elegant, actionable insight. And Marcus knew it. Our professional relationship was a well-rehearsed dance. I would spend weeks, sometimes months, deep in the digital mines digging for gold. I would emerge, blinking in the light, with a nugget of pure, unadulterated insight. I would present it to him in a detailed, carefully researched report. He would nod, his brow furrowed in concentration. Interesting, Eleanor. Very interesting. Let me marinate on this, he would say. Then a week later at a senior management meeting, I would hear my insight, my words, my conclusions, flowing effortlessly from his mouth. He would never mention my name. If someone asked about the source of the data, he would smile his charming smile and say, "The team and I did a deep dive." I was the team, a faceless, anonymous engine that powered his ascent. For a long time I accepted this. It was, I told myself, the way of the world. I was not ambitious in the same way he was. I didn't crave the spotlight. The work itself was my reward, the puzzle, the discovery, the elegant satisfaction of a theory proven correct. I found my fulfillment in the process, not the applause. And so, I let him take the credit. I cashed my paychecks, I enjoyed my quiet life, and I continued to do the work I loved. I was, in a way, complicit in my own invisibility. I did not yet understand that in a world like his, invisibility is not a form of protection. It is an invitation to be consumed. The beginning of the end was the project I codenamed Chimera. It started not as a formal assignment, but as a flicker of an idea, a nagging question that kept me awake at night. Sterling Thorn had vast, siloed reservoirs of data. We had sales data, customer service logs, marketing analytics, supply chain metrics. Each department guarded its data jealously. They were separate kingdoms, and no one had ever built the bridges to connect them. The question that haunted me was, what if they could be connected? What if I could find a way to integrate these disparate streams of information to create a single unified model that could not only explain past consumer behavior, but predict future trends with a startling degree of accuracy? It was an audacious idea, a monstrous hybrid of different disciplines. Hence Chimera. For 6 months it was my secret. I worked on it during my lunch breaks, in the evenings, on weekends. I taught myself new coding languages. I read academic papers on predictive modeling. I built a shadow network on a secure, personal partition of my hard drive, a digital sandbox where I could experiment. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to build the bridges. I started to connect sales spikes to specific marketing campaigns, customer complaints to supply chain disruptions. The patterns that emerged were breathtaking. It was like learning to see in a new dimension. I could see the invisible threads that connected a customer's casual social media, like to a multi-million-dollar purchasing decision 6 months later. I could predict with 94% accuracy which product lines would see a downturn based on the sentiment analysis of customer service calls. It wasn't just data analysis. It was a form of corporate prophecy. It was the most important, most revolutionary work I had ever done. It was my masterpiece. When it was finally ready, I knew I couldn't keep it to myself. This was too big. This could change the entire trajectory of the company. It could be the sterling in Sterlingthorne, a legacy for the firm's founder, a man I deeply respected. And so, I made my fatal mistake. I decided to show it to Marcus. I scheduled a one-on-one meeting with him in his glass-walled office. I was nervous but also vibrating with a fierce proprietary pride. I laid out the architecture of Project Chimera, the methodology, the staggering results. I showed him the predictive models, the elegant flowing lines of the data visualizations I had designed. He was quiet for a long time, staring at my laptop screen. He didn't smile his usual charming smile. His expression was one of intense, hungry concentration. The look in his eyes was the same look a shark gives a drop of blood in the water. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a low hum, this is paradigm shifting." He stood up and began to pace his office. "This is board level. This is the future of the company." He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something raw in his eyes. It was envy. Pure, unadulterated envy, mixed with the frantic calculations of a thief casing a vault. "Keep this between us for now," he said, his voice regaining its smooth, authoritative tone. "This is too sensitive to be floating around. We need to control the narrative. We need to package it correctly. I'll handle the strategy for the rollout. You just focus on refining the models. Send me everything you have. The raw data, the code, the presentation deck. I need to live with it, to really get under the hood." I should have known then. The language he used, control the narrative, handle the strategy, it was his classic playbook. But I was blinded by my own excitement, by his validation of my work. I wanted to believe that this time it would be different, that something this big, this undeniably mine, could not be stolen. That evening I compiled everything. I zipped the folders containing months of my life's work, my intellectual property, my soul. The final presentation file was my pride and joy. It was a thing of beauty, a seamless, intuitive journey through the complex world of Chimera. Each slide was layered with data, but presented with a clarity and elegance that made it easy to understand. It was perfect. But as I attached the zip file to the email, a cold, prickling sensation crawled up my spine. Premonition. It was the voice of every instinct I had honed over the years, the same instinct that allowed me to find the patterns in the data. And it was screaming at me, "He's going to take it. He's going to take it all, and then he's going to get rid of you." It wasn't a possibility. It was a certainty. He couldn't afford to have me around. I wasn't just a contributor. I was the sole architect. My very presence would be a silent testament to his fraud. I sat there for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button, I could delete the email. I could take my project and walk away. I could go to his superiors, to Mr. Sterling himself. But I had no proof. It would be my word, the word of a quiet analyst against his, the charismatic executive. I knew how that would end. A profound sense of cold, clear rage settled over me. It was not a hot, fiery anger. It was a glacial calm. He was going to try to erase me, but he had made a critical error. He had underestimated me. He saw me as a resource, a tool. He had forgotten that the person who builds the machine also knows how to break it. Or, in my case, how to arm it. I didn't delete the email. Instead, I opened the presentation file one last time. I had a degree in computer science that I rarely mentioned, a relic from a past life before I fell in love with data analytics. I spent the next 2 hours not adding to the presentation, but embedding something within it. A series of perfectly hidden conditional macros. A script that would lie dormant, invisible, untraceable. It was not a virus. It was not designed to destroy. It was designed to reveal. I programmed it with a set of specific triggers. It would only activate if the file was opened in presentation mode, on a specific network, the secure network of the 48th floor boardroom. And the final trigger was a date. The date of the next quarterly board meeting 2 weeks away. If all those conditions were met, the presentation would proceed normally, flawlessly, until a very specific slide. Slide 17. The slide titled, Future Synergies. A Unified Vision. When the presenter clicked to advance from that slide, my script would take over. It was my time bomb. A silent, patient, elegant little piece of code, buried deep within the architecture of my masterpiece. When I was done, I saved the file, attached the zip folder to the email, and wrote a simple message. Marcus, as requested, here is the complete Project Chimera file. Let me know your thoughts. Best, Eleanor. I pressed send. And I waited. The trap was set. The 2 weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare, with me as the sole silent combatant. On the surface, nothing changed. I came to work, I performed my duties, I responded to emails. But beneath the placid surface of my routine, I was in a state of hyper-awareness. I was a seismologist, waiting for the tremor that I knew was coming. Marcus was a changed man. The charm was still there, but it was now overlaid with a brittle, nervous energy. He avoided my eyes. Our interactions became curt and transactional. He was a man trying to distance himself from a murder weapon. He would walk past my desk without his usual jaunty greeting. He was already practicing a future in which I did not exist. He had sequestered himself with my work. I knew this because I had one last secret ace up my sleeve. A small tracker script I had embedded in the main file, which notified my private email every time the file was opened, saved, or modified. My inbox was a running commentary on his theft. Chimera_final.pptx was opened at 8:17 p.m. Chimera_final.pptx was saved at 10:32 p.m. A new version, Chimera_v1.pptx, was created at 10:34 p.m. He was clumsy. He didn't try to understand the intricate workings of the models. He was simply repackaging them. I saw him change the color scheme to his preferred palette of navy and gold. He rewrote my concise, data-driven executive summary into a longer, more grandiose introduction filled with his favorite buzzwords: leveraging, optimization, paradigm shift. He was spray painting his name onto my cathedral. He never touched the core code or the embedded macros. He didn't even know they were there. He was a child playing with a beautiful, complex machine, completely unaware of its hidden mechanisms. My only confidant during this time was Sarah, a senior network administrator who worked on the 42nd floor. Sarah was a woman in her late 50s, with a sharp wit and a profound, cynical understanding of the corporate world. We had a friendship forged over years of shared coffee breaks and mutual respect for each other's competence. She was one of the few people who saw Marcus for exactly what he was. "He's going to gut you, Elle," she told me one afternoon, as we sat in the sterile basement cafeteria. "He's got that look. The one he had right before he pushed out David in marketing." I remembered David. a brilliant, creative guy who had suddenly decided to pursue other opportunities after launching the company's most successful campaign in years. A campaign Marcus had presented to the board as his own. I just sipped my coffee. I know, I said. Sarah looked at me, her gaze sharp. You're awfully calm about it. I'm a strategist, Sarah, I replied, a small, cold smile touching my lips. I believe in preparing for all eventualities. She studied my face for a moment, then a slow grin spread across hers. Okay, Vance. I don't know what you're planning, but I want a front row seat. You'll get one, I promised. The axe fell on a Tuesday, 1 week before the board meeting. The timing was predictable. He needed me gone before the presentation, to erase any last-minute claims I might make, to ensure my ghost would not haunt his moment of triumph. He summoned me to his office at 4 o'clock. The afternoon sun was streaming through the glass walls, casting long shadows across the floor. He didn't ask me to sit down. He stood behind his large, empty desk, a manila folder in his hand. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. He kept looking at a point just over my left shoulder. Eleanor, he began, his voice taking on a tone of rehearsed, solemn regret. As you know, the company is always evolving, and we're in a period of significant restructuring. I said nothing. I just watched him, my expression neutral. My silence seemed to unnerve him. We've had to make some difficult decisions, he continued, fumbling with the folder. And unfortunately, your role as senior data strategist is being made redundant. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. Redundant. Eliminated. The sterile, impersonal language of corporate execution. He wasn't firing me for a reason. He was simply deleting me from the system. I see, I said. My voice was steady. Inside, my heart was beating a slow, heavy, triumphant rhythm. The final piece of the puzzle had just clicked into place. He finally looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had expected tears or anger or pleading. He had not expected this calm, unnerving acceptance. Threw him off his script. Look, Eleanor, this isn't personal, he said, a line so cliché it was almost comical. You're a talented analyst. I've already spoken to HR. They've put together a generous severance package. We'll even provide a glowing recommendation. We want to make this transition as smooth as possible for you. He was trying to buy my silence. He was offering me 30 pieces of silver to go away quietly. That's very considerate of you, Marcus, I said. He slid the folder across the desk towards me. You'll need to clear out your desk. Security will escort you out. It's just protocol. I understand, I said. I picked up the folder. I did not open it. I held his gaze for a long moment. In that moment, I let him see a fraction of the cold, clear contempt I felt for him. I saw him flinch, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. He knew. On some level, he knew that he was not dealing with the victim. Thank you for the opportunity, Marcus, I said. The words were polite, but the tone was ice. I've learned a great deal during my time here. And with that, I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him standing alone in the afternoon sun. The walk back to my desk was a strange out-of-body experience. The open-plan office, usually a cacophony of quiet activity, seemed to fall silent as I passed. Heads popped up over monitors. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and a certain morbid relief that it was me and not them. I had become a cautionary tale in real time. I packed my belongings into a small cardboard box. My favorite mug, a framed photo of my late father, the brilliant engineer who had taught me to love logic and code, a few well-worn textbooks, my whole professional life reduced to a small, pathetic pile of objects. When I was done, a stoic security guard I'd never seen before was waiting for me. He walked me to the elevator, his presence a silent, formal humiliation. As we waited, the elevator doors opened, and a group of junior analysts got on. They saw me with my box and the security guard, and their cheerful chatter died in their throats. They shuffled to the back, avoiding my eyes. The ride down the 47 floors was the longest ride of my life. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt clean, purged. I had been excised from the system, but I had left a part of myself behind. A ghost in the machine. A time bomb ticking silently in the heart of the 48th floor. As I stepped out of the building and into the cool evening air, I took a deep breath. I was unemployed. I had been publicly humiliated. But I had never felt more powerful. The game was no longer mine to play. It was his. And he had no idea of the rules. The week I spent in exile was one of the strangest of my life. The rhythms that had governed my existence for 5 years were gone. There was no morning alarm clock jarring me from sleep, no crowded subway commute, no endless stream of emails demanding my attention. The silence was vast and unnerving. I should have been panicking. I should have been frantically updating my resume, scouring job boards, networking. That was the rational thing to do. But I did none of it. I felt suspended in time, in a liminal space between the life I had lost and the one that was about to begin. My entire being was focused on one single point in the future. Thursday, 2 p.m. The board meeting. I spent my days in a state of quiet, disciplined anticipation. I went for long walks in the park, watching the autumn leaves fall. I read novels I had been meaning to get to for years. I cooked elaborate meals for myself, finding a simple, grounding pleasure in the act of chopping vegetables and following a recipe. I was ostensibly doing nothing, but in reality, I was doing the most important work of all. I was waiting. Sarah was my lifeline to the outside world, my spy on the inside. She would call me every evening, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "He's practicing," she told me on Monday night. "He's booked the main conference room for 3 hours every afternoon. The junior guys say they can hear him in there talking to himself. Rehearsing." I pictured it vividly. Marcus alone in that vast, empty room, pacing in front of the giant screen, reciting my words, practicing my insights, making them his own. The image didn't anger me. It filled me with a kind of pity. He was like a bad actor, desperately trying to memorize the lines of a play he didn't understand. "And get this," Sarah continued, a note of glee in her voice. "He submitted the budget proposal for Chimera. He's asking for a $15 million initial investment and a new department. A department he, of course, will run. $15 million. He wasn't just stealing my idea. He was building an empire on it. The sheer scale of his ambition was breathtaking. He was betting his entire career on this one single presentation. Is the board likely to approve it?" I asked, my voice calm. "Sterling is the key," she said. "Robert Sterling. The old man. He's been skeptical of Marcus for years. Thinks he's all sizzle and no steak. But the numbers in your presentation, Elle, they're undeniable. If Marcus can sell it, Sterling will have to go for it. This is his make-or-break moment." Robert Sterling. The founder. A man of quiet integrity. A brilliant strategist from the old school. A man who, like me, believed in the stories the numbers told. He was my real audience. He was the judge and jury. The day before the presentation, my nerves finally began to fray. A sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced my composure. What if it didn't work? What if my code had a flaw? What if their IT department had run a deep scan and found my script? What if Marcus, in a rare moment of intelligence, had decided to rebuild the presentation from scratch instead of using my file? I couldn't bear the uncertainty. I needed to know. That night, well after midnight, I put my plan into motion. From the safety of my apartment, I logged into a secure VPN, routing my signal through a dozen servers across the globe. I navigated to a backdoor I had built for myself into the Sterling Thorn network years ago, a maintenance portal that I had used for remote work, a portal whose existence only I and Sarah knew about. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my heart pounding in my chest. I navigated through the firewalls, my old admin credentials still active, a small oversight in their otherwise thorough erasure of my existence. I found my way to the secure server where the boardroom presentation files were stored. There it was, Chimera _ presentation file.pptx. I didn't open it. I didn't dare. But I ran a checksum, a digital fingerprint analysis, comparing it to the file I still had on my personal drive. The checksums matched perfectly. He hadn't changed a thing. He hadn't rebuilt it. He was using my file. My beautiful, elegant, perfectly armed file. A wave of profound relief washed over me. So intense it left me lightheaded. The bomb was still there. The bomb was live. But checking wasn't enough. I wanted to be there. I needed to witness his downfall. Not just hear about it later from Sarah, but to experience it myself. And so, I executed the final, most audacious part of my plan. I went back into the code of the presentation file, not the one on the server, but my own copy. I had embedded one last macro. A piece of code I hadn't been sure I would use. A piece of code that, when activated by the main script, would perform one simple function. It would turn on the microphone of the presenter's laptop and stream the audio in real time to a secure, encrypted voice channel. A channel only I could access. It was a staggering breach of security. It was highly illegal. But I was no longer an employee. I was a ghost. And ghosts are not bound by the rules of the living. I uploaded the new, slightly modified macro to the server, overwriting my previous version. It was a simple 2-minute operation. I logged out, erased my tracks, and shut down my computer. There was nothing left to do. The stage was set. The audience was waiting. And I had the best seat in the house. Thursday arrived, gray and overcast, the sky the color of slate. I woke up with the feeling of crystalline clarity. The anxiety of the previous days had vanished, replaced by a calm, absolute certainty. Today was the day of the verdict. I spent the morning in quiet ritual. I cleaned my small apartment until every surface gleamed. I watered my plants. I sat by the window and drank a cup of black coffee, watching the city below slowly come to life. I was a general on the morning of a battle, finding peace in the small, ordinary routines before the chaos began. At 1:45 p.m., I sat down at my desk. I put on my best pair of noise-canceling headphones. I opened my laptop and navigated to the secure voice channel I had created. It was silent, just a faint digital hiss. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I looked at the clock on my screen. 1:55 p.m. 1:56 p.m. At precisely 2:01 p.m. the channel crackled to life. I could hear the faint ambient sounds of the boardroom, the shuffling of papers, a quiet cough, the distant, muted sound of city traffic through the 48th floor windows. My God, it had worked. I was in the room. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. The long, polished mahogany table, the plush leather chairs, the row of stern, impassive faces that made up the board of directors. And at the head of the room, Marcus standing behind the lectern, my laptop open in front of him. "Good afternoon, everyone," a voice said. Robert Sterling. His tone was calm, resonant, no nonsense. "Thank you for coming. Our agenda today is singular. Mr. Thorne, our head of strategy, has a proposal he believes will be of significant interest. Marcus, the floor is yours." "Thank you, Robert," came Marcus's voice. It was a marvel of practiced confidence. Smooth, warm, completely in command. He was playing the part beautifully. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, what I am about to show you is not just a new strategy. It is a new philosophy, a fundamental shift in how we understand our business, our market, and our customers. I call it Project Chimera." He clicked the remote. I heard the soft swoosh of the first slide appearing. I knew it by heart. A simple, elegant title slide with the project name against a deep blue background. For the next 20 minutes, I listened as Marcus delivered my presentation. He was flawless. He moved through the introductory slides, explaining the concept of data integration, the limitations of the old, siloed approach. He used my phrases, my analogies. He spoke of building bridges between data islands, of listening to the ghost in the machine. He delivered the lines with a conviction that was chilling. He had said them so many times to himself in that empty room that he now believed they were his own. I could hear the shifting in the chairs, the occasional murmur of interest. He was winning them over. I heard Sarah's voice in my head. "The numbers are undeniable." He moved into the core of the presentation. The case studies, the predictive models. I could hear the growing excitement in his voice as he walked them through the data. showing them how Chimera could have predicted the failure of a product line, how it could have anticipated a competitor's move. "As you can see," he said, his voice ringing with passion, "we have been flying blind. Chimera is our eyes. It is a corporate nervous system, allowing us to feel the market in real time. The potential is, and I do not say this lightly, infinite." There was a moment of silence, then Sterling's voice cut through. "The numbers are impressive, Marcus. Very impressive. Where did this analysis come from? Who on your team was responsible for this?" My heart stopped. This was it. The moment of truth. Marcus chuckled, a smooth, self-deprecating sound. "Well, Robert, as you know, I lead a team of brilliant minds. This was a collaborative effort, a true synergy of our strategic resources. But the core concept, the architecture, that was something I have been developing in my spare time for the better part of a year." Liar. The word was a scream in my silent apartment. He was not just taking my work. He was inventing a heroic narrative for himself. "I see," Sterling said. His voice was unreadable. "Please continue." Marcus moved on. He was approaching the end. He was on slide 15, slide 16. I knew what was coming. I held my breath. "And this," Marcus said, his voice building to a crescendo, "brings us to the future. To the new face of Sterling Thorn Analytics. A company that doesn't just react to the future, but actively shapes it." He clicked the remote to advance to slide 17. This was the slide titled, "Future Synergies. A Unified Vision." This was the trigger. The script. My silent, patient little soldier woke up. "And as you can see from this next slide," Marcus began, but his voice faltered. There was a long, profound silence. Through my headphones, I could hear only the sound of his breathing, suddenly ragged. I knew what they were seeing. It wasn't my beautifully designed chart of future growth. It was a new slide, one he had never seen before. A slide with the stark white background and a single line of black sans serif text. "Project Chimera. A personal log. Author Eleanor Vance." "Marcus." It was Sterling's voice, sharp with confusion. "Is there a problem with the presentation?" No, it's just a glitch," Marcus stammered. I could hear the frantic click, click, click of the remote, but he was no longer in control. My script was. He couldn't go back. He couldn't go forward. He was trapped. After a 10-second pause I had programmed in for maximum effect, the slide advanced on its own. The next image on the screen was a perfect high-resolution screenshot of the initial email I had sent to him 6 months ago, the one where I first proposed the idea of Chimera. My name and the date were clearly visible. A low murmur went through the room. "What the hell is this?" someone whispered. Click. The slide advanced again. This time it was a screenshot of one of my early drafts, a complex flowchart of the data architecture. All across the image, like a ghostly watermark, were the words, "Property of E. Vance. Confidential." Click. A screenshot of an email from him to me. "Eleanor, this is incredible. Keep it quiet. I want to handle the rollout strategy personally." His voice, when he finally spoke, was a strangled whisper. I don't understand. This isn't my file, must have been corrupted." "Be quiet, Marcus," Sterling commanded. His voice was like a whip crack. Click. The slides kept coming. A relentless chronological narrative of his theft. Drafts, emails, data logs, all bearing my name, my digital fingerprints. It was my work, my process laid bare for them all to see. It was the story of a crime, told by the evidence itself. And then came the final slide. The coup de grace. It was a screenshot of the termination email he had sent me. The cold, corporate language glowed on the screen. "Your role as senior data strategist is being made redundant, position eliminated. Effective immediately." Beneath it I had added one final devastating touch. I had pulled the metadata from the file he was presenting. At the bottom of the slide, in bold red letters, was a line of text. "This presentation was created by Eleanor Vance. Last modified by Marcus Thorn on October 24th. Last saved. 9:14 p.m. The day before he fired me." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a dense, heavy, suffocating silence. I could hear a pin drop on the mahogany table. I could hear Marcus's breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. He was drowning. Then I heard the sound of a chair scraping back. "Marcus," Robert Sterling said, and his voice was no longer angry. It was filled with a profound, weary disappointment. "You have 5 minutes to get your personal belongings and leave this building. Your access has already been revoked. A security detail is waiting for you outside this room." "Robert, please," Marcus begged, his voice breaking. "I can explain." "No, you can't," Sterling said, his voice flat and final. "You have stolen, you have lied, and you have humiliated this company and yourself. There is nothing left to say. Get out." I listened to the sound of his footsteps, shuffling away from the lectern. I heard the boardroom door open, and then close with a soft, definitive click. He was gone. A long moment of silence passed. Then Sterling spoke again, his voice directed to the rest of the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we owe someone a profound apology. And a job offer." I took off my headphones. I closed my laptop. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling city below. It was still gray, but it no longer looked like slate. It looked like silver. The verdict was in. My phone rang exactly 1 hour later. The caller ID was the main switchboard for Sterling Thorn Analytics. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Eleanor Vance speaking," I said, my voice calm. "Ms. Vance, please hold for Robert Sterling." There was a click, and then the familiar, resonant voice came on the line. He sounded tired. "Eleanor," he said. He didn't call me Ms. Vance. "I imagine you know why I'm calling." "I have an idea," I said. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "First, on behalf of the entire company, I want to offer you my deepest, most sincere apology. What Marcus Thorn did was inexcusable. It was a betrayal of our trust, and more importantly, a betrayal of yours. There is no excuse for it." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said. "I have 2 questions for you, Eleanor," he continued. "The first is a matter of professional curiosity. That was the most elegant, most brutal, and most effective piece of corporate takedown I have ever witnessed. How in God's name did you do it?" A small smile played on my lips. "I'm a strategist, Mr. Sterling. I believe in letting the data speak for itself." I could hear him chuckle on the other end of the line. It was a dry, appreciative sound. "Indeed. A lesson Marcus Thorn will have a long time to contemplate." He paused. "That brings me to my second question. As of an hour ago, the position of Director of Strategy is vacant. It's yours if you want it, along with a full budget to develop Project Chimera, with full autonomy and your name attached to every part of it. It's the least we can do." This was the moment I had imagined. The vindication. The triumphant return. The offer of the kingdom. I had expected to feel a surge of elation, a desire to accept, to walk back into that building and claim what was rightfully mine. But as I stood there looking out my window at the endless city, I felt nothing. No desire to go back. The fight was over. I had won. But the victory wasn't about getting my old life back. It was about earning the right to build a new one. I had proven my point. I had reclaimed my work, my name. The thought of returning to that glass tower, even as a queen, felt like stepping back into a cage, albeit a gilded one. The silence of my apartment, which had felt so vast and empty a week ago, now felt like peace. It was the silence of freedom. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice clear and certain, "I am incredibly grateful for the offer. Means more than you know. But I have to respectfully decline." He was quiet for a moment. I could hear his surprise. "May I ask why?" "That part of my life is over," I said simply. "Project Chimera was my masterpiece, but it was built within your walls. I think I'm ready to see what I can build on my own foundation. I'm starting my own consulting firm. A small one, focused on ethical data strategy." There was another long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with a deep, genuine respect. "I understand," he said. "I can't say I'm not disappointed, but I understand. In that case, Eleanor, allow me to make you another offer. When you have your business cards printed, make Sterling Thorn Analytics your first client. Now it was my turn to smile. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Sterling." "The pleasure is all mine," he said. "And Eleanor? Good luck. The world needs more people like you. People who build things." We said our goodbyes and I hung up the phone. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the room wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. The time bomb had gone off. The villain had been vanquished. The story was over. But my life was just beginning. Vengeance is often depicted as a raging fire, a destructive force that consumes everything in its path. But my story is not about that kind of fire. It is about a different kind of power, the quiet, patient, and unyielding force of the truth. I built a trap not of steel and wire, but of logic and code. I didn't destroy my enemy. I simply created a stage and allowed him to destroy himself. The most elegant solutions I have found are often the simplest. You just have to let the data speak for itself. And so my question for you, for everyone listening to Woman's Verdict tonight, is this. Have you ever had to lay a quiet, intricate plan to see justice done? What was the moment you decided to stop being a victim of someone else's narrative and start writing your own, with the truth as your ink? Share your stories in the comments below. Your quiet battle might just be the inspiration someone else needs to light their own candle in the dark. And as always, if this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more from her revenge arc. Thank you for listening.